Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leo Roy, and I'm your DCR Commissioner, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And I'm so pleased that there's so much interest in this project that we're going to talk about this evening. So thank you all for coming. Before I give you the welcome, it is my pleasure to introduce representatives of your two wonderful elected officials. You should know that you are ably represented on Beacon Hill by Senator Sear and Representative Peake. And unfortunately, they couldn't be with us this evening, but they have sent their representatives. So speaking for Senator Sear is Leslie Sandberg and Dottie Smith for Representative Peake. Ladies, and then I'll give the introduction after that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Leslie Sandberg, and I'm Senior Advisor for Senator Sear. Senator Sear is sorry that he could not make it. Thursdays are often times where the Senate is in session, and this happens to be one of those situations. I'm going to read a short statement from him so you know where he stands on the issue. Senator Sear wants to thank Commissioner Roy for being here, the staff of DCR, and the members of the Wellfleet community for attending tonight's public forum. Tonight's meeting is a result of a process that he and Rep. Peake started in the beginning of this year, an effort to make sure that the many valid concerns raised by the residents and businesses about the serious public safety consequences of DCR's proposed rail trail plan are heard and incorporated into the plan going forward. Senator Sear knows his constituents in Wellfleet are involved, invested, and very committed to their community. Thank you, whoever put on the light. Residents and business feedback on DCR's current rail trail plan should be seen as important and necessary advice, input, and recommendations for DCR's plan going forward. Earlier this spring at town meeting, the voters supported almost unanimously for the town to, quote, I'm quoting from the warrant, consider alternative routes for the bike trail extension and ask the appropriate agencies of the Commonwealth to halt any planning or construction beyond Old County Road until those deliberations have occurred. The main concern we have heard is that the current plan is too dangerous for cyclists and cars. This has been repeated to our office time and again. This is not a case of not wanting the bike trail extension for so many. It's a matter of the location and the potential public safety risks. It's time to find a way to work with the citizens of Wellfleet to resolve their concerns. Senator Sear remains concerned with the current DCR plan as presented. Senator Sear hopes that as a result of tonight's forum, Wellfleet residents, town officials, DCR and MassDOT staff will work more collaboratively together to find a way to implement a bike trail extension plan that everyone can support and feel safe using. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dottie Smith, and I'm Chief of Staff for State Representative Sarah Peake. And unfortunately, the representative also tonight had a schedule difficulty, was not able to be here with you all tonight. But rest assured, she is very vitally interested in what is going on down here. And she wants also to thank the Commissioner, Commissioner Roy, for coming here tonight, the staff of DCR, all of the members of the community who have showed up this evening to give your feedback and to talk about your concerns relative to this project. Tonight is an opportunity to see the latest draft plans and drawings and for you to give your feedback to DCR about these plans. We are confident that DCR will listen and incorporate your comments into further revisions of the plan going forward. In addition, Senator Sear and Rep. Peake are committed to ensuring that MassDOT and DCR coordinate their efforts so that a comprehensive plan that addresses bicycle, pedestrian, and automobile safety is developed, and that there is because there is in fact a lot going on at that intersection. Since the beginning of the year, Senator Sear and Rep. Peake have worked to be a bridge to bring stakeholders, DCR, and MassDOT together, and they will continue to be that bridge. Rep. Peake's hope is that as a result of tonight's forum, Re- Residents of Wellfleet, town officials, DCR, and MassDOT will work more collaboratively together to find a way to implement a bike trail extension plan that everyone can support and feel safe using. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie and Dottie. I appreciate it. So as I said, my name is Leo Roy. I'm your DCR Commissioner. And the reason I'm here in the community today is I want to hear firsthand the comments from the community once you've heard our presentation. We were last with you at the Senior Center some months ago when we had a preliminary plan. It was a very fruitful meeting. We heard the input from the community loud and clear. We've modified our plans in response to the feedback that we received, and we look forward to continuing this to be an iterative process with this evening. So this is my chain of command. I bring you greetings of Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito. And also I want to give a quick shout out for our new Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Kathleen Theoharides. I think that the appointment of Secretary Theoharides was really inspired on the part of the governor. She has an undergraduate degree from Dartmouth in environmental studies, a master's degree from the Yale School of Forestry. She's been involved in land conservation, but most importantly, she was most recently sort of the climate czar for the Baker-Polito administration. She's worked on the Municipal Vulnerability Plan, which is an opportunity to work with all the municipalities on planning for climate change, and also the architect of our combined State Hazard Mitigation Plan and Climate Action Plan. For years, we had done hazard mitigation plans as required by FEMA to prepare for things like earthquakes and hurricanes and floods and those kinds of things. But for the first time, we combined the State Hazard Mitigation Plan with the Climate Action Plan and put them together. And the thinking behind that is that we're acknowledging the significant hazard that climate change will be to us, and by considering it in that context. And Madam Secretary was the architect of that plan, and so well received by FEMA was it that FEMA is now asking other states to do exactly the same thing. So once again, Massachusetts is providing leadership on this. So she's new in her position, just a matter of weeks, and I did want to draw her to your attention. The other thing I'd like to point out, which we start many of these meetings with, is the DCR mission. So it's clear what we're all about on your behalf. We at the DCR manage some 500,000 acres across the Commonwealth, from Wellfleet Hollow State Campground here in the east, which is our newest campground of the 31 that we manage across the Commonwealth, up to Walden Pond, Plymouth Rock, Mount Greylock in the far western part of the state. What's extraordinary is all of these recreational resources belong to you, and they are so close to where people live. Massachusetts is the fourth most densely populated state, but we have the 9th largest park system, which means that our parks and our recreational facilities are literally in people's backyards, as is the Cape Cod Rail Trail. And those recreational resources from the ocean to the mountains, that's what makes Massachusetts such a wonderful place to live, to have these recreational facilities in our backyard. So at the DCR, our mission is to protect, promote, and enhance our Commonwealth of natural, cultural, and recreational resources for the well-being of all. And that's what we're trying to do with this project. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present to you an update on the 2-mile extension of the Cape Cod Rail Trail to what we see as its terminus here in Wellfleet along the former rail corridor. And there's been some talk of location and why is it where it is. Well, the Cape Cod, and Dan Driscoll will speak to this in a moment, but the Cape Cod Rail Trail was actually the rail bed, as you all know. And that was acquired by the state back in the 80s. And that's the corridor that we have to operate within for this trail. What we're talking about tonight is the piece from Lecount Hollow Road to the proposed new terminus here in Wellfleet at Route 6. We're going to share some updated parking lot designs, and this is where we got good feedback at our last meeting on both the Lecount Hollow parking lot and the proposed terminus parking lot. And most importantly, once you've seen the presentation by Dan and our consultants, we want to hear from you what your thoughts are. The Lord gave us one mouth and 2 ears, and so I'm here to listen to you and to take those comments back in our further conversation. So again, thank you for being here, and with that, let me introduce Dan Driscoll, Director of Recreational Facilities at DCR.
Thank you all, and thanks for coming out tonight. It's really great to see such a good turnout for this project. Sean, please. So here what we're seeing here is called the vision. The vision goes back quite a ways of trying to develop the Cape Cod Rail Trail. I first should give you a little history of the railroad itself. The railroad was originally built in 1876. The railroad was the primary way for people to get to the Cape. It was heavily used for decades through World War II. Following World War II, it continued to be used into the 1950s and mostly for freight from the 1950s through the 1960s, when it was then abandoned and torn up. There was a lot of hard work by community advocates over the next 10 to 15 years. And in the 1970s, the Commonwealth began purchasing sections of that rail corridor for the purposes of developing it as a shared use path. The first section, this is a, let me just get this pointer. Here we go. Oh, no, back, I'm sorry. So here is a parking lot down at Station Ave in South Dennis and all the way up to Wellfleet. This is a 28-mile corridor. The original 18 miles were opened in September of 1981. An interesting side note is that 18 miles was built for $1 million. And when you hear some of the prices of where these corridors have gone now, we still think it's a great value of investment, but they certainly have gotten a lot more expensive than that. That 18 miles was completed, and then a push began to extend it into Wellfleet throughout the 80s. In 1996, an additional 4 miles were built from Depot Road in Eastham to the current terminus at Lecount Hollow Road in South Wellfleet, which gets us up around here. You can go to the next slide, Sean. Thank you. So again, the 22 miles that was finished by 96, it's all managed by the DCR. It's all operated and maintained by the DCR. We certainly have some partners that help us with stewardship and cleanups along that corridor, but primarily it's the DCR who is 100% responsible for it. And one of our primary people here tonight, Eric, is just exceptional at the work he's been doing along that corridor, helping us take care of it. The regional significance of this is well known to all of you. When we first were trying to build this thing back in the 80s, you can imagine, like a lot of linear corridors, there's a lot of concerns and abutter concerns in particular. One of our problems now is that how many abutters have created connections to this corridor, often without coming through us for the appropriate permission. So they're technically encroachments that we tolerate because we love to see motels and restaurants and bike shops and ice cream shops all connecting to this corridor, providing services to the users and also economic stimulation for the communities that it goes through. Next. So because the corridor was so popular, that initial construction of $1 million, while that was cheap, it also was not to the quality standards that the DCR now builds shared use paths. So the project by the early 2000s had become almost unusable. The amount of root damage and public safety issues along that initial 22 miles. So we went out in 2008 and spent $6.5 million and completely restored all 22 miles of the Cape Cod Rail Trail from Lecount Hollow back to Dennis. The success of it led to our vision of a phased expansion of this corridor. And one of the main phase expansion you want to hear about tonight is obviously the Wellfleet expansion. But we just finished also the last 3.5 miles of the DCR section of the rail trail, which is all that we're responsible for. And it's the only portions of the rail trail that can be redeveloped. So we now have ownership and design plans or full construction of the entire 28 miles. If you haven't been down to Dennis and Yarmouth, the last 3.5 miles that we built in partnership with DOT are really exceptional, and they feature 3 primary bridges, one over Station Ave, one over Route 134, and the most recent one over the Bass River. And our Commissioner Leo Roy will be officially opening that, even though it's all being used now. We'll be doing an official ribbon cutting sometime this summer of those 3.5-mile extension. This is the Bass River Bridge. Interesting to note is you could tell it's a collaboration between DOT, who's very interested in linear corridors, but don't always think about recreational amenities the way the DCR does. So we, with the commissioner's leadership, fought hard for this overlook here. It's something they typically wouldn't include in their corridors, but in our partnership, we're always thinking about the ecology, the landscape, and how people can best utilize and use these resources for pedestrians and cycles. Next. So here's our eastern expansion. This is Lecount Hollow Road. This is the terminus of the trail, which we're going to talk a lot about with our new parking lot design. Here's the Payne Campground, which the commissioner mentioned. And just what a wonderful opportunity now to be able to camp at Payne's and bike 25 miles off-road with your family. It's kid-friendly. You could go to the PB Bistro for your coffee and croissant in the morning without further congesting that whole area, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So there's a lot of great opportunities that this is sort of a campground where you could park your car for 5 days, and if you're so inclined, not really get back in it, which is a really, really great initiative by us to pull that off. Next. So the guiding principles for our design are a 10-foot wide, multi-use, fully accessible pathway with 2-foot shoulders. So the path will have a 14-foot cross-section. The 2-foot shoulders will be respides for both walkers, elderly, potentially equestrian, who want to just access other trails. The rail corridor itself is not traditionally a really great equestrian corridor, but it's a critical access corridor for equestrian to get to the trail riding that they do throughout both Eastham and Wellfleet. Also going to have a maximum grade of 5%. That meets the American Disabilities Act. We're committed to that this entire corridor, all 28 miles, is fully accessible for people with disabilities, which then also benefits the elderly as well as people with baby carriages and other users. Young kids on bikes, for example. We're trying to avoid, minimize, and mitigate rare species impacts. The DCR is always committed to the ecology of these corridors. We've worked really long and hard on some of the past phases with the National Park Service as a really excellent partner in making sure that we're thinking long and hard about doing the right thing in both the plantings that we choose as well as what we have to take down to build this corridor. We save as much as possible. And we're trying to avoid impacts to wetland and cultural resources as well, and create safe trailhead termini. That is really important to us, that both the beginnings and ends of these trails, wherever the parking lots are clearly marked so everybody understands that that is the end of the trail, that that is the end of our facility, and it is the end of the facility that we consider to be completely family-friendly and safe. Next. So our team is a full-service, multidisciplinary design firm. Stantec, Derek Hugg is here. He's going to do the next portion of the presentation for us. They're recognized as a regional leader in trail projects. They've got over 500 miles of shared use trail that they've designed. And in addition to Stantec, we have SMC as our survey and base mapping preparation, and LEC Environmental Consultants, who has done the brunt of all of the wetland flagging and delineation of important ecological resources. For folks that aren't aware, we've already gone through the Wellfleet Conservation Commission and received our permit. We have also already gone through the state's MEPA unit. That's the Mass Environmental Policy Act unit, and we have filed an ENF, and we have also received our MEPA certificate. So the project is currently fully permitted, with the exception. Are we still waiting on the 91? We didn't get that, right? All right, so we have one more permit, and then it'll be fully permitted. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Derek and let him go through some of the details of the design. we'll wing it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. As Dan mentioned, my name is Derek Hugg. I'm a senior transportation engineer with Stantec. I'm going to go through my piece of this presentation is mostly repeated from the first meeting, and I see many familiar faces here, so I know many of you have seen this before, but we're going to run through it for people who haven't been here, but I am going to try to go through it relatively quickly so that we're not taking up a lot of the question and answer time. So up here on the screen is the existing condition of the trail. As Dan mentioned, it was the old rail bed, those tracks, the ballast stone, where the ties were all ripped out several decades ago. In the meantime, it's been unmaintained. While it's in relatively decent shape, it's certainly not smooth, but it is used. It is used mostly by walkers. It's a little rough for bikers, for most bikers. I didn't see any out there in the several times I was out there, but I did see a lot of people walking their dogs and what have you. Next slide. After we're done with the project, the idea is to turn this into a 10-foot paved rail trail, shared use path with a minimum of 2-foot seated shoulders on each side. Where necessary, because of adjacent slopes or to prevent access, unauthorized access to the trail, we may, in certain sections, we'll be adding rail fencing. Next slide. So I'm going to start from the southern end of the corridor, and I'll work my way north. This is the end of the current Cape Cod Rail Trail as you look into the Wellfleet Trailhead at Lecount Hollow Road. Next slide. The current parking lot has one row of parking. It holds 32 parking spaces. It has one two-way aisle of vehicular traffic that's about 24 feet wide. But since people do use the section north of Lecount Hollow Road, there are people who continue through this parking lot and continue to the north, which means we have a mixing of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, people backing out of parking spaces, intermixing with people who are passing by on bikes either or walking their dog, either to continue north along the rail bed or to head out toward Route 6 or elsewhere along Lecount Hollow. Next slide. So this is the parking lot the current parking lot in plan view, and what I want to sort of focus on is the alignment, or the misalignment rather, between the current driveway access and where the path continues, where the railroad bed continues on the opposite side of the road. It was one of the first challenges we had to address. Next slide. So our current design for this parking lot is to maintain the same number of spaces, but what the existing edge of the lot is right along this line here. So we're going to essentially move the entire parking lot to the west about 15 feet, and that serves two purposes. One is to allow for a separated bike ped facility on the east side of the parking lot. The separation here will be a fence between the drive aisle and the shared use path, and it also serves to better align this orange or brown piece here is the shared gravel driveway on the opposite side of Lecount Hollow Road. So these two accesses to Lecount Hollow better align. Next slide. So this is the existing condition of Lecount Hollow Road. It is a two-lane road. The speed limit's 30 miles an hour. And as it stands right now, you can see there's a sort of a horizontal curve here. There's another one, behind where this photo was taken. And with those horizontal curves in combination with existing vegetation on the side of the road, sight distances aren't what we would really like them to be. As part of relocating the parking lot, we'll be able to address much of the vegetation issue on the south side of Lecount Hollow Road. Next slide. So in addition to realigning kind of how the path and the driveway aligns, we also are intending to add a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, also known as an RR, we often call it an RRFB. The stats up here indicate that the Transportation Research Board has done some studies that indicate that motorist yielding percentages go significantly higher when these are activated. They come in several different forms. The one that we intend to install here would be a solar-powered unit that is operated by a push button by either bicyclists or pedestrians as they want to cross. So what this will do is you'll have these two rectangular lights that will rapidly flash back and forth for a set period of time when somebody activates it through the push button. Next slide. So as we go north of Lecount Hollow Road, there is this, the rail bed it actually serves as a shared driveway to two residences. Although my understanding is there are some people who use this as a cut through on occasion, particularly during the summer months when Route 6 traffic is a little heavier. But these slopes were cut out of the land for the railroad back in the 1870s, and as you can see, in the intervening 140 or so years, they have reforested. There are now mature trees on both sides of that slope, and it was important to us to try to maintain as much of that growth as we possibly could. Next slide. So this is a cross-section of what this section of path will look like when we are done. So we'll have a 12-foot shared use gravel driveway and a 10-foot shared use path separated by a 5-foot buffer. And the idea here is to avoid having to cut into these slopes, thereby having to remove all of the vegetation, is that we will fill the bottom of this more or less ravine until we have the width we need to have both the driveway and the shared use path, and anything above the limits of disturbance right here and over here will be left intact. Next slide. In addition, there are a few other elements that we have to address that have occurred over time. One is where there are some steep slopes adjacent to the rail bed, there are some washout areas where the slope is degrading and creeping into the rail bed, and we'll have to address those. In addition, we have a number of different trail access points to the adjacent utility corridor that are used by motorcyclists and ATV users that we're going to want to close off because we don't want any motorized traffic on the shared use path. Next slide. This is another sort of view of the sort of a typical cross-section of the path where we're just going to sort of flatten everything out, make sure we have our 2-foot shoulders. We will, in some cases, in this case here, this is probably where there's a washout or something along that line, and we'll fill in so that way we stabilize this slope. Where there is an access or an opening, this area here may have some plantings in addition to just being grassed. There'll also be additional plantings of trees and shrubs where we need to screen for adjacent residences. Next slide. And to that point, this is our preliminary plan. These numbers are probably going to change a little bit, and they're probably going to go higher. But I don't want to get into all the details of all these different plants, but the idea here is that there are a lot of new vegetation is going to be planted as part of this project. We have over 160 native trees, over 600 native shrubs, and where we're doing any grading work, the shoulders to the path will be planted with native grasses, and the side slopes will be planted with native grasses that are better suited to stabilizing slopes. Next slide. As we continue north, we get to Old Kings Highway. And there are, on both sides of Old Kings Highway, there are very steep slopes. As I'm out there, I'm trying to piece together how the history of this works. I don't know if there was a bridge back when this was a railroad that was removed, or if the road was built after the railroad was removed. But either way, there are really steep slopes on both sides as you move down. And what our challenge is here is we need to meet ADA standards, and so we cannot exceed a 5% slope. Currently, these are 10 to 15% slopes, so what we're going to do is we're going to have to cut into these slopes a little bit to flatten them out, make that rise between the elevations happen over a longer distance. Next slide. So here's what this section would look like. We cut into the existing berm that is basically set up that the railroad was built on. Again, trying to minimize as much impact to existing vegetation as possible, and then set up our path to allow for ADA accessibility. Next slide. This is a detail of the crossing. We have a pretty extensive plan here to treat this crossing. It includes adding warning signs and advanced warning pavement markings to Old Kings Highway as well as along the path. It includes a gateway treatment for path users to make it very clear that there is an upcoming crossing. And in addition, obviously, we were showing quite a bit of new vegetation. Right now, it's very, very sandy and very open to access for other vehicles. So we want to close that up. Next slide. This is the current northern terminus of the trail at Route 6. Route 6 here on the right. This is the end of the path. You can see there's a couple things going on. Number one, there is a clear line of sight as you work your way up the path. And two, there appears to be vehicular access going on in this corridor. And so that's something we want to address. Next slide. This is the newest plan for the northern terminus lot. This is the existing pathway that comes out, right about here. This lot is about 50 spaces, as we're showing it. I think it's 51 or 52 spaces. There are two existing structures on the site. There isn't a single-family home here, and it didn't come through, but there is a small shed in this area here. Both of those structures will be raised to allow for the construction of the lot. There will be a single access to the lot, and the idea is to place this access as far away from the Main Street signal as we possibly can. In this area here, this is strictly a two-lane road. As we move closer to Main Street, the roadway tends to widen out, which makes access in and out a little bit more complicated. We just got our survey for this the other day, so we haven't had a chance to look into this in detail, but there is an existing berm between Route 6 and this back lot here. As much of this as we can save and maintain, we're going to do that. So while this is shown as all sort of new material, as much of the existing material as we can save, we intend to do so. And there will be a trailhead here. I wouldn't pay too much attention to the arrangement of these things, but they will be similar to the Lecount Hollow trailhead currently. There'll be some bathroom facilities, there'll be some benches. The arrangement of this is just very preliminary and is probably going to change a few times before we're through our final design. But the other idea here is we want to make sure that there is no direct line of sight from this path straight out to Route 6. So we kink the path over to the right, make it very clear through materials, through signage, that this is the end of the path. Here is your parking lot, and that is the northern terminus of the project. With that, I will turn it back over.
Great. Derek, thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation. And now we want to hear from you. We do have a few public officials who signed in to speak, so we'll take those first and then go to members of the public who have signed. First is Select Board Member Helen Miranda Wilson. You come to the microphone.
It's, sure.
Respectfully, as your public official, one of your public officials, I would like very much to hear from the public first.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if other public officials who signed in would honor the request of the Select Board member, we'll move to the members of the public. We have 28 of you that have signed up to speak today. So if you can try to limit your comments to a minute, that would be great. If you have to go a little over, we understand, but in the interest of time, you can try to leave your comments. And what we're particularly interested in hearing is comments on the plan that you've just received. First to speak is Lucy Buckley.
I live right across from the egress, the one entrance and exit from the parking lot area. I'm directly across my driveway. At the end has the ghost bike. So my concern, there are many, but it's a bottleneck all summer. And if you add 50 more cars, maybe going in and out, that one in and out spot, I had hoped there would be a way to come in and then go out around the property and come out further up on Route 6. So that's a concern, to have all of that traffic in just the one And then the other is, of course, the tragic death of Miles Tibbetts. If anyone makes a mistake in any way or assumes they can cross the highway, which is Miles was a local, he knew, but he was killed instantly there. And it's just such a reminder of how dangerous Route 6 is. And then you bring so many more people and families and the little buggies that children sit in. I'm afraid it's an invitation to tragedy.
Great, thank you very much. So addressing your second point first, that's why in the design, we're making it very clear that this is the end of the trail. So the trail ends at as far away from Route 6 on the lot as we can to make it clear that there's no continuation onto Route 6 from the Cape Cod Rail Trail. With regard to the second exit, as part of the acquisition of the Amsler property, there is an easement onto Oriole Way. We are still researching the easement and what is the nature of that easement as to whether that can be used or not. So that's an open question. We don't know. So that's why you're seeing a current design this evening that has one way in and one way out, because we know we can do that. We're still doing the deed research on the other question, but thank you for your comments. Linda Pakula?
Hello. I'm concerned that that graphic here on the upper right does not show the opposite side of the road. I can't believe that you would not look at that in your planning. I am Lucy's neighbor. I live on Way 68, which is exactly opposite that driveway that you have there for the entrance. And at the corner of our street, there is a white ghost bike to remind everyone of a tragedy that had occurred at that corner. And I don't want to see my family as a statistic, and I vehemently oppose that driveway, and you should expand that graphic. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Oliver.
I hope everyone here in the audience and those watching this meeting on TV will write to Governor Baker to voice your concerns about this plan and to sign our petition. The proposal by DCR and DOT is an ill-conceived plan that demonstrates an alarming disregard for human life. It's beyond comprehension that two state departments, who should be looking out for the welfare of its citizens and the general public, are instead endangering them with a plan that far exceeds state and federal safety guidelines. Two-way bike paths, or side paths as they are called, only work if there are a few curb cuts and if the curb cuts are spread far apart. Three other major factors are volume of vehicles, speed of vehicles, and frequency of use of the curb cuts. There are formulas to determine if two-way bike paths are feasible. One needs to have a total score of 13 or less just to be feasible. Wellfleet's score for this two-way bike path is 47. A two-way bike path in this area is lethal, plain and simple. DCR wants to compare us to an urban setting. Many curb cuts in urban areas have traffic lights. Vehicle speeds are less and traffic patterns much more consistent in urban areas. A majority of our motorists and bicyclists will be unfamiliar with our town. Urban areas have no options. Most everyone, given a choice, will want a bike trail to be far away from a highway or a busy road. With motorists trying to pull in and out of our very busy curb cuts in this area while trying to merge onto our very busy Route 6, and at the same time trying to negotiate 2 lanes of bicyclists traveling in 2 different directions at varying speeds, it is easy to visualize the nightmare that will unfold on a daily, even hourly basis. While a loved one's loss is incalculable, there is a federally provided tool of economic measurement called the value of a statistical life. The intention of this number is to put a value on preventing a fatality or serious injury, and it is used to produce a cost to society for a fatality or serious injury, regardless of age, income, or mode of travel. In 2016, this number was $9.6 million per life lost. This figure is also used to calculate costs for serious injuries. So lawsuits and insurance rates will skyrocket, and Wellfleet will soon become an area to avoid. This will dramatically affect the towns of Truro and Provincetown as well. The solution is no parking lot on Route 6. It is a known fact that cyclists ignore signs. I'm a cyclist. Continue the breakdown lane as a bike lane through Wellfleet on both sides of Route 6 for the experienced riders. Stop the extension of the rail trail at Old County Road. From this point, take the trail down the power lines across Coon Hollow, then across Long Pond Road. And once across Grosse Hill Road, take the trail down Old Kings Highway, which already traverses the Herring Creek. No bridge would be needed. From here, Old Kings Highway makes a straight line emerging at Collins Road in Truro. Access to the town of Wellfleet can be made using the Long Pond Road and its bridge over Route 6. This way, there is no interaction with Route 6. Grades on the power lines can be mitigated, especially if the trail is kept to the ocean side of the power lines. You will have serious grade issues in Truro that you cannot moderate. There is precedent for power lines and bike trails to coexist. Dollar differences would be more than made up for by avoiding the 9.6 million plus value per life, because that was a 2016 number, remember, it's gone up.
Stephen, do you have much more? Because we
No,
really
I'm
need-
almost done.
Thank you.
Land issues can be settled as, again, there is precedent for it, and we are talking about a 10-foot wide path. Now this would be a true multi-use trail. No one is going to push a baby carriage, walk their dog, or go on a family bike trip on an extremely dangerous two-way bike path on Route 6. What could be achieved by using the power line Old Kings Highway route would not only enhance the Lower Cape and the rest of Cape Cod, but be something all of Massachusetts could be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. And Steve, thank you so much for drawing attention to some confusion that we believe exists on the various projects. The projects that we are here to discuss this evening is the extension of the Cape Cod Rail Trail on the existing bed, which ends at Route 6. The Cape Cod Rail Trail does not extend beyond this parking lot and the terminus designed in the upper right-hand corner. What's contributed to the confusion is the town of Wellfleet and the Department of Transportation, our sister agency, are looking at bicycle accommodation and two-way track on Route 6. That is a separate project, and it is not connected to this project. Our project for the Cape Cod Rail Trail ends at this parking lot. There are no plans to extend the Cape Cod Rail Trail beyond this location because we don't currently own any of the right-of-way, whether that's power line or other things, and we do not intend to acquire any more right-of-way. So the idea, I know there are legitimate concerns expressed by you and others about the DOT proposal for bicycle accommodation on Route 6, and those are very, very valid concerns. But there are no curb cuts here for the Cape Cod Rail Trail. It is a separate facility that goes along the rail trail. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. Dan Reeds? Okay, thank you, sir. Catherine Smith?
I just want to respond to your response. It is disingenuous to tell us that these are two separate projects, okay? These are not two separate projects. Bringing the parking lot and the trail to Route 6 forces DOT to come up with this two-way bike path on Route 6. If you don't bring the trail and the parking lot to Route 6, we don't have this insane two-way bike path on Route 6. It's as simple as that. So it is one project. You can put all the different numbers on it you want. It is one project.
I hear what you're saying, sir. The DOT project is not a project that the DCR is involved with. It's a joint project, as I understand it, between the town and DOT with regard to the intersection. And as a result of the intersection project, as I understand it, sidewalk accommodation has to be provided. That's about the extent of my knowledge of the DOT project. So this project is not dissimilar from other expansions to the Cape Cod Rail Trail that we've done up and down the corridor, such as at Station Landing and so forth. So I understand there's a feeling that the two projects are connected, but in fact, sir, they are not connected. They are two separate projects.
Commissioner-
Catherine Smith?
Commissioner, if I could, well, Catherine's coming up. If I could just offer, I think it's important to understand that the condition under which there was a tragic death at this point is still there. It's the exact same condition with a public corridor leading out to Route 6, dangerously close to Route 6. To recommend leaving it in that condition, to recommend leaving it in the condition where there was a fatality, and it is a public corridor currently, the public can use it. They can bike on it. Clearly, somebody was biking on it that tragically died. I've ridden it on mountain bikes and hybrids. So to leave it in that condition, compared to what we're talking about, where there'll be proper signage saying you're at the end of the trail, all kinds of safety warnings, I guess we don't really understand that thinking, because we want to make it much safer. And the commissioner's right, it's completely separate from DOT.
Thank you, Dan. Catherine?
Hi, yeah, so I actually live on Oriole Lane, so I do live on that area, so I can attest that that is not a safe area even as it is. Even today, I was with a friend pulling out of my driveway and we almost got hit by a car. So it's not even just bicycle accidents that happen there, lots and lots of car accidents happen there. I've been hit driving there, my mom has been hit every single summer. We hear a car accident happen out there, we have to go and help the people. That's just a part of our summer, is going to help the people who get into car accidents at the end of my driveway. If you put a parking lot there, that number will skyrocket. You know, yes, of course, biker fatalities are a big problem, of course, too, but we also have to consider the number of fatalities that will happen in terms of car accidents. I know the people who lived on Wade Lane were mentioning that was a dangerous area, and yeah, as somebody who lives on Oriole Lane, I can tell you that is a very dangerous area. I also want to mention the fact that by taking down that building, you are getting rid of affordable housing, which is a big problem in Wellfleet already. And I know the DCR, I believe it was, had mentioned that they were giving the family enough time to move out. But no matter how much time you give a family, forcing them to move out of their home is still going to be an undue burden. And so you're taking people away from our community by getting rid of this affordable housing and putting in a parking lot.
Thank you. Is it Ian Schenk? Aaron, thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Shank. I live in Wellfleet, been here for almost about 20 years. I have a construction company. I live on Lecount, our Cahoon Hollow Road. I hear a lot of things about how historical the rail trail is and how the railroad's so historical. Well, if we pave it, that's taking away from the natural historicness of the railroad. Two, I'm not talking about a bike trail. I'm talking about public safety here in Wellfleet, okay? You've dumped people on the highway there. You're going to get people killed. I was the first person on the scene when that little kid got hit by the bicycle, okay? So I can say that we can talk rails, bicycles, all this stuff. You dump people on the highway, get in their car to pull out on the highway there, you're going to have multiple accidents. You're going to be responsible, not me.
Thank you, Aaron. Ken Shea. Ken Shea. Rebecca Noble. Peter Noble. Melissa Ayala. Oh, we got one. Thank you.
Just the comment about the conditions at Old County, Old Kings Highway where the bike path would cross over. If you just simply go there now and stand there, you can see that it's not a 10% grade. The slopes maybe on either side of the railroad track corridor are quite steep, but you've got lots of flat space there for a nice little gravel parking lot if you want to build one there. It's a great place to stop the bike path and end the construction there. Then you're not leading 1,000 to 3,000 cyclists onto Route 6, a very dangerous place. And the DCR and the DOT and the Cape Cod Commission, they meet monthly and talk about this project together as a single project. So the idea that they're two separate projects is maybe a legal technicality, but I mean, we all know that it's one project, so you should speak about it that way. That's my
Thank you,
comment.
sir. Melissa Ayala? Tell me the right pronunciation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melissa Ayala, and I own the Little Capistrano Bike Shop in Wellfleet. I am here, I think putting the trail out on Route 6, the parking lot there is not a good idea at all for safety. No matter what way you look at it, it is going to get people are going to think, oh, I want to go into Wellfleet Center, they're going to cross over. It's just, everybody's covered it, but that is just dangerous and an accident waiting to happen. I think one thing that was missed too with this is for about 20 years, the rail trail had two sections at Rock Harbor and at 124 in Harwich, where the trail ended and you went down by Rock Harbor on 124, and people were scared to ride on that. And no matter what way you look at it, that same feeling is going to happen because people are going to want to get there. Right now, if you go to travelusnews.com, you'll find that the Cape Cod Rail Trail is the #1 activity on Cape Cod to do. And I think that we need to really think about that because people come because of the beauty, they want to be safe. I really think we need to keep it safe so that people will still enjoy biking and think of it as that beauty that it is. I'd like to say, owning the bike shop, something I'll always remember is about 8 years ago, Miles Tibbetts came into our bike shop with his mother and bought a bike. And he was a great person that would have went on to do great things. His mother and him are just unbelievable people. And he was killed there. And I think that we all need to take a minute and just think, what if that was my grandchildren? Or what if that was my child? Would we want that to happen? And I think, with all due respect, that everybody needs to think that. And no matter what way you look at it, this is all one big project. It really is. And you can say what you want, but putting that right there is going to put everybody out onto Route 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb Taylor? Barb Taylor?
After my comment, I'll give you, Mr. Roy, a signed petition asking the state to stop work on the extension and the Route 6 bike path. A copy will be sent to Governor Baker. At the first DCR meeting in October, I asked that work on the extension be stopped to allow us to think of ways to improve biker safety without causing even greater public safety problems and traffic nightmares, as the state's plan will do. I ask that again tonight. However, if the rail trail must, absolutely must, be extended now, I request that it stop at the new state campground Wellfleet Hollow. I'd like to mention just one problem with a highly visible and certainly publicly promoted rail trail with a big parking lot on Route 6 and the associated DOT bike path on Route 6. Not only will it encourage inexperienced bikers and families with kids biking on the rail trail to continue on and across Route 6, it also will attract Wellfleet vacationers unfamiliar with the dangers of Route 6 to bike to the new trailhead. This will require bikers to either cross Route 6 or bike against the traffic flow. Since people rent vacation homes throughout Wellfleet, bikers will cross Route 6 at many locations. Even if multiple new crosswalks are installed on Route 6, every location will not be served. Also, not all bikers will use crosswalks because, quite frankly, bikers, walkers, joggers cross where it's convenient, not at crosswalks. And even if all bikers used crosswalks, they still are at risk because all cars won't stop all the time. I learned this the hard way when I was hit by a car while crossing an intersection on my bike. I had the right of way. It did not matter. I wasn't seriously injured, but unfortunately, other people won't be so lucky. How can you protect all bikers on and crossing Route 6? I don't believe it is possible unless you ban motor vehicle traffic. Once again, I make this plea. Give us a chance to develop better and safer options for biking in Wellfleet. Please, please stop the extension at Wellfleet Hollow State Campground.
Thank you. Carolyn Marcus. Carolyn Marcus. Thank you. Thank you. Catherine Letourneau. Richard Mason.
Yeah, I'd like to go to the other end of the trail in Wellfleet and talk about the intersection of Lecount and the bike path. That area is, I mentioned in the first meeting, is already seriously congested by P&B traffic. They've got a high level of traffic in and out, be it a bakery. People come and they have coffee and then they leave. And the dinner hours probably aren't actually as bad as in between. You have the post office not quite exactly across from the entrance to P&B, but that road is a two-way road. So I have people entering to go into the post office, I have people exiting, and the license for the marijuana shop will cause an astounding amount of traffic through that area. I've seen some activity at that business location, and they apparently are gearing up to open. I don't know when. Then with another crosswalk for the bikers with the flashing lights and yield signs, you're going to, again, in a relatively short space, I don't know what it is, 100 feet maybe, 150 feet to Route 6, that's going to fill up with traffic really quick. And then you're going to, what are the people trying to get off of Route 6 and make the turn into the post office area, into P&B, into the bike path, or actually up Lecount? So you're making a place where cars, I think, are just going to stack up during the peak season. I mean, one day I waited for 13 minutes at Lecount to make a left-hand turn onto 6 where I had to cross. And that traffic is going to be the same or worse every year in the future. So we've got to really consider the impact of upstream traffic as well on Route 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Lillian Greenberg.
Gentlemen, I'd like to invite you to return to Wellfleet in 4 weeks and spend the weekend here, and then you can understand the concerns.
Thank you. Dana
Just a point of
Frechette.
A point of clarification
Dana?
on Nina coming up.
Dana.
Dana? Point of clarification on the Lecount parking lot. We're not changing the capacity of that lot. I believe we said it's currently 32 spaces. It would stay 32 spaces. The objective is to make the transition coming out of the lot and through the lot a major safety improvement for all users.
Thank you. Dana.
Okay, this really looks to me, I'm not in the butter, but this, and many people have spoken to the safety and traffic issues and the citizen displacement issues that this project would bring about. I would like to speak to the fact that that lot looks rather big and ugly, out of character with Wellfleet. And I don't think Wellfleet needs a state-sponsored manicured look. Thank you very much. I think I'm against this project completely. Just leave us alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Walsh. Wendy Walsh.
Yes, I just want to lend my support to the idea of terminating the extension before it gets to Route 6. Wherever you decide is better than stopping it at Route 6.
Thank you. Peter Cook. Peter Cook.
Hi, democracy is pretty messy, and Wellfleet's a pretty diverse place. If you get 5 Wellfletians together, you usually hear 6 opinions. So it's remarkable that there's near unanimous opposition to your plan. It's also notable that there's almost unanimous agreement that you've ignored the town's inputs. So people have contacted the state individually. There have been some encouraging petitions launched in the past that raised public awareness and have brought a lot of people to this meeting and created a lot of discussion on this. We still feel that the comments have been ignored, so we're in coordination with the Town Bike and Pathways Committee and with other citizens. We're launching a petition for action by Governor Baker to stop your plan and to stop the DOT plan. They may be separate plans, but we recognize that they're joint plans. Be happy to read the draft petition if you'd like.
If you could leave that with us, that would be great.
I'd prefer to give the final draft to Governor Baker.
Okay.
However, it covers many of the points that have been discussed here.
Okay.
And
In the interest of time, because you have a number of fellow citizens that would like to speak this evening, so if you could leave the petition, that would be appreciated.
so I'll let them speak.
Thank you so much. I would like to point out that we are not ignoring the voices of the people of Wellfleet. We're standing here listening, taking notes. So we are listening to you, and we're here to take your input. So I'm sorry you feel that we have not been responsive, but we have had a series of meetings where we've come and met with select board members, your town administrator, and others to really gather. And this is now the third meeting? The third meeting we've had in this community to take input. Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, may I take my turn now?
Certainly.
Thank you. I wanted to hear what some people said, and I agree with absolutely everything, except Mr. Franchito said something that I felt was somewhat inaccurate. Because we are all abutters to Route 6 and what happens to it. And that particular intersection is something that everybody in the area, including the 2 towns to the north of us, drive through all the time. We are all stakeholders. One of the meetings that was held, at which 7 people from both agencies showed up, was not a meeting like this. It was held for stakeholders or abutters. I heard about it because I'm on the listserv for the Bike and Walkways Committee. I requested that. It's reasonable. It's an advisory committee for the Select Board. And at that meeting, which was not posted, not videoed, there were no minutes, and there were a good number of people there, both people from both agencies very generously showed up in Wellfleet, right? And there was a lot of very good information. And I was shocked because our Select Board has asked repeatedly for almost a year for just such a meeting with both agencies about this project. That's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is, at the beginning, when we were getting presentations from the 3 of you, which I appreciated, 2 references were made of the DCR working in partnership, quote unquote, for example, on the project in Dennis. You do this all the time. That's the second point I wanted to make. The third point I wanted to make is I used to be on the planning board, and it's all about curb cuts. This parking lot, never mind the bike trail, if it was a business and it was going to add that many people going in and out of the curb cut on Route 6 in the summer, would be very questionable in that particular location. And I want to absolutely support the idea of your continuing to use the Lecount Hollow parking lot, which people don't need any extra room in because, hey, all the beaches people use bicycles and the beach parking lots, and there's no throughway. And when you go through a parking lot, if you're on a bike, you slow down. We're not all complete insane racers going through parking lots if you're on a bike. And I also, and this comes up with the sharks, life is dangerous. We should avoid making it more dangerous, but we have to accept that anytime you have cars or other bicycles riding around bicycles, you have to watch out what you're doing. You have to wear a helmet, and nothing that happens is going to be completely safe. But what we've got now, and I live on Route 6, way to the north of this, is we have two decent breakdown lanes on either side of Route 6 that people on bicycles use all the time. We need more sharrows. We need those breakdown lanes to go through that very dangerous intersection. And we need an acknowledgement, which we got on May 10th at the meeting with the 7 different officials, that in fact, the DOT's project and the DCR's project do relate to each other. If you had no parking lot there, you just maybe paved that 2 miles back to Lecount Hollow. You had no invitation for people to start or finish there on Route 6. Fair enough. Just don't invite people onto Route 6 by having a parking lot there. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene Deitch.
Commissioner,
Irene Deitch.
folks, prior to, if I could, I'd like to just give a little historical perspective on a lot of these great comments we're hearing. And I would offer that, remember I said this corridor was first built in 1980. If you like, yeah,
Thank
sure.
you, I'm Irene Dage. We've been pretty hard on you. Perhaps it would help us if you would tell us what your vision was of this project. What did you think was going to happen there at that parking lot?
So the plan is, as was when the state acquired the corridor back in the 80s, was to complete the extent of the Cape Cod Rail Trail as acquired by the state.
And what was going to happen to the bikes and the people and the cars? What did you think?
So this parking lot will serve like many of our other terminuses on the Cape Cod Rail Trail, where people either stop or start their cycling experience on that. As I think you're all familiar, there's a lot of people that get on and off the bike trail at different points too and don't have to drive. So the plan is that this parking lot is the terminus of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, and we're seeking to enhance safety by having it. But I'm hearing the concerns that you're expressing this evening.
Please listen. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
What I want, thank you.
I think let's move on.
What I wanted to offer was that since 1980, so this corridor's been opened a long time, right? 22 miles, approximately 36 road crossings, 6 or 7 parking lots, many of which are in busy areas like Route 28, Station Ave, our new 100-car parking lot, comes out to a 5-lane road on Station Ave. And despite all of those years of use and crossings, there's been one death, the tragic death in this town on the only undeveloped, unmarked, unsigned section of the corridor. So that is the only death since the first trail opened in 1981. A pretty remarkable record considering how many road crossings and how many parking lots adjacent to busy roads exist on that corridor.
Thank you, Dan. Myra Durrell. Myra?
Thank you. Appreciate your presentation tonight, although I consider it's just partial. Those of us who've lived in Wellfleet for some time or have been following this issue for the past year understand that this area is subject to many, many developments in the near future. I thought you were going to complete, going into phase 2. Of course, that's not your purview. I understand that. It's the DOT. We know that if this lot goes through, unless you put barriers so people can't get onto Route 6, they're going to say, oh, there's PJ's down the road. Let's get an ice cream. Oh, there's this, there's that. There are several businesses just around the corner down Route 6. If you were to seal that parking lot off, maybe that would work. People could only bike from Lecount Hollow parking lot up here, then they'd have to turn around and go back because they could not access Route 6. We know the DCR, the DOT, you have your own purviews. We believe this to be a single project along with others that are planned for the intersection in Wellfleet. We have an expanded version of Cumberland Farms on the east side of Route 6 on the near the intersection there that is also going to dispense gasoline. There'll be gas pumps, more ins and outs on Route 6. We have, she can speak to it better than I, we have boating and trailering access. We have additional businesses up and down that Route 6 corridor between this parking lot that you're proposing and the main intersection. There is a lot going on. I fail to see how you cannot take into account the big vision of this major intersection in Wellfleet with all that is happening there. Let me just address your comment about not having had any other accidents. This is our main road. There are no other roads to get from where we are to Provincetown and back, or from where we are to Orleans and back. This is our sole access. When you screw this road up, it affects all of us. I really hope that you will hear the voices of people who are concerned and whose lives will be impacted, whether they're bikers or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Holmstrom. David Holmstrom.
Hi, I'm David Holmstrom. I find myself, as I often do, in somewhat the minority here. I appreciate what you said about the safety of the bike trail. I've ridden it from one end to the other, and there are lots of very potentially dangerous places, and I think that the DCR has done a really excellent job of making it a safe and very valuable asset. I do think there are, legitimate concerns about it ending at Route 6. We currently use that driveway to go to the little spring that's there, and there's, if you're driving out, there's a curve. It's very hard to see oncoming traffic there. I think you need to think about it. It's not the best place. But I'm really concerned that, like so many things in Wellfleet, there are going to be so many oppositions that this is not going to happen in my lifetime. And this is a vital link in the vision of having a good bikeable path all the way from the bridge to Provincetown. What are we going to have, a little gap here in Wellfleet? I don't think that's acceptable. Question has been raised about making an alternative path on the power lines. I also think that would be a preferable route. However, we've been told several times that it's impossible. I'd like to know, is it really impossible? Because if it is, we need to stop asking for it and start, thinking about other realistic things. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Bonnie Shepherd. Bonnie Shepherd.
Yeah, well, I found myself arriving here with one set of thoughts and having some other thoughts after hearing everybody. I am also, often with David, a very frequent user of the bike trail. I've gone, to Chatham and Dennis and, the place where it breaks and you have to go along a road in Orleans, which I, don't enjoy. And, our favorite bike ride has us riding about, from Pleasant Point, about 3 blocks against traffic to turn down Indian Neck Road. So I know about the dangers of Route 6. I do think that it's important to extend the bike trail. That I would love it if the bike trail were extended to where it is. I think that my fellow residents are right that that particular location for the parking lot is too dangerous. I think you could just not make a parking lot at all, and have some kind of fencing around the terminus that makes it impossible for bikes to go onto Route 6 from the terminus. I don't know if it's possible to have a parking lot near Payne's campground, or, it's not that long a bike ride. You can just go back to the terminus at Lecount Hollow. So I'm speaking in favor of having the terminus there and against the parking lot in that location.
Thank you. Gail Ferguson?
I came just to be another voice that says that this is an accident waiting to happen on Route 6. And however, as I listened to the presentation and I saw the diagram of the new expanded parking lot, I had to wonder why you would think that people would pay attention to a sign saying this is where the bike trail ends. But at the same time, the presentation early on impressed me that there was a possibility that the new state acquisition of the Payne campground might have something to do with this. And I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm wondering if the long-term plan for that campground envisioned a way for the campers to get close to Wellfleet Center. And when I think about a 50-car parking lot so close to the first entrance into Wellfleet, and I think about the fact that there's not even sidewalks on that end of Main Street, I think that it's another part of the danger that will come about as a result of the ending of the bike trail within close proximity to Route 6. So I'm hoping that you're going to rethink and replan. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are at the hour that we were going to end the meeting, but we are certainly willing to stay longer. There are 16 more people who have signed up to speak, which we would like to hear from. If those of you were counting on the meeting ending at 8 o'clock and you need to leave, please quietly exit. But we will stay until we've heard from the 16 other people who have requested to speak, because I'm taking notes, we're listening to your comments, and we're getting the sense of the meeting and what you're telling us. Next speaker is it Mimi Butts?
I also feel that this is only a partial presentation. I was at the presentation that they had at the beginning of the year, and I believe Stantec is the contractor for both the bike trail and for what's going to happen at the traffic light and the connection with Route 6. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a different project team. Derek is not working on the other project.
Okay, but what we heard at that meeting talked about what was going on Route 6. And that is what has most people upset. And your terminus here is the beginning of it. But we also talked about putting a 2-lane bike trail on the east side of Route 6. And the Stantec representative at that time came to the meeting and said to the select board, I'm kind of mixing up the two meetings here, but at any rate, there were 2 meetings, one before the selectmen. And he asked at one of the meetings if, at the beginning meeting, if the town wanted a two-way bike trail on one side of the route or a bike trail on either side of the route. And the selectmen agreed that what they wanted was one bike trail on either side of Route 6. If they had to have a bike trail on Route 6 at all, that was preferable to a two-way bike path, okay? That's what he talked about. And we have since had abutters meetings about that. Now, tonight, we're not discussing that at all, even though I think that's what most people are concerned about. Same contractor, maybe they're different teams, but same contractor, building both, ready to dump cyclists out on Route 6. I had written something to talk about the plan on Route 6, but I won't, since you say you're the DCR. So let me just read the part about the 50-car bike path.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of the phrase, if you build it, they will come. So even if DCR said the bike trail ends at Route 6, you know that cyclists will see the markings of a two-way bike trail on Route 6 that was discussed, and think that it's a safe route to town. Additionally, they will have start and stop riding because of all the curb cuts along the route. This also causes frustration and leads to poor decision-making. Okay, for the state, this is the quickest and cheapest route. Their goal is to complete a bike trail from the bridge to Provincetown. Once they've built their proposed route, they're gone. And we in Wellfleet are left with the fallout. Therefore, I urge you to stop this ill-conceived and dangerous route before we are left dealing with the consequences, including fatalities, which will certainly ensue.
Thank you. Martha Wilson. Martha Wilson. Okay, thank you. Bob Wagner. Bob Wagner. Linda Skrabininsky.
Hi, last year I tried to do some online research about the history of when people first started talking about this bike path extension into Wellfleet. And there was a meeting that the town had, and I'm not sure how many people were there, but there were a number of people, and everyone was unanimously in favor of figuring out a way to have the bike path go through Wellfleet and go across Long Pond so that people did not have to cross Route 6 at all. And I don't know what happened to that plan, if it involved the National Seashore Path, and that's why it was abandoned. But anyway, that's one of the concerns that I have. I support the bike trail ending at the campground or some other place off Route 6. The only other thing I wanted to say is that this is not just about bike safety. I lost a son in a car accident. This is about the safety of all people on Route 6 in their cars. Little children, when a car has to slam on their brakes, passengers, drivers. This is not just about biker safety. One time there was an accident on Route 6 between here and Eastham. It took us 2 hours to get from our house off Cahoon Hollow Road to the town line of Eastham because of all the traffic being stopped. I also support the person who said, would you please come to Wellfleet during the summer and drive on Route 6 during the day, and then make your decision about whether we are correct in our concerns. Thank you. No, just drive your car and try to exit on and off Route 6 in this area. You cannot do it sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary and Rick, is it Madrone? Madari, sorry.
Hi, I'm Rich Madari. We have a home that abuts the current proposed bike trail expansion near Old Kings Highway. And in addition to that, I also park my boat in currently where the parking lot will be at the proposed terminus. So I guess I have a vested interest, but I hear a lot of opposition here in this room tonight, but you know, I have spoken with a lot of people in town, and a lot of people are enthusiastically in support of this expansion. Now, the business of Cape Cod, I think, is tourism. People love bicycles, they love the bike path. You know, Route 6 is a terrible place, no matter if you're in a car, if you're walking, no matter what. If you want to cross Route 6, it's a disaster. This is the end or the beginning of the bike trail. And, you know, if you have a brain, you don't cross Route 6. So I hope that's clearly marked, and people should avoid Route 6 on a bike. Also, people ride on all of the back roads here in town. They're beautiful roads. They're very curvy, very hilly. They're very dangerous if you're on a bike or if you're walking, because a lot of people drive very fast, and the visibility is very diminished. If you're on a bike, people can't see you and they're going fast. So anything that supports people not being on the back roads here and on a bike trail, I think is an enhancement to safety and not a detriment. So I just want to take a minority view in this group here at least, and say that we enthusiastically support the bike trail expansion. And I think that what you've done with the proposed terminus here to block it from to make it clear that that's the end, it looks great from what I can see. So thank you.
Thank you. Larry Frank? Larry Frank? And after Larry is Gary and Sharon Creamer. You yield, okay. And then after that would be Barbara Boone. Sir.
Hi. I'm a bicyclist, and I enjoy the bike trail, you know, the existing bike trail. But I think this project has one tragic flaw, and that's the access to Route 6. In the summertime, it's a well-known pattern that you have to turn right to turn left. You have to turn right, go up, and then turn around. So you got, you know, additional problems there. And we've had 2 meetings here with the DCR about this plan, and both of them have had access to Route 6, and both of them, I think you've got an overwhelming message that we don't want the access to Route 6.
Thank you. Barbara Boone. Barbara?
Hi, good evening. I brought up a note because I just wanted to make sure that I got some of this right. I was noted with interest when you were giving your opening remarks that the guiding principle for design is to create a safe trailhead termini. And I would assume that that extends not only to bicycles, but to cars exiting and entering as well. So I don't have to beat the same drum that most of us see that as a horrible entrance and exit, that parking lot. But also I noted in your opening comments, and y'all have all said multiple times how you expect people to stop at the end of the trail and turn around, that there's plenty of marking. But in your own opening comment, you extolled the virtue of leaving the bike trail at the end of Lecount Hollow and going to PB. And I get it, we all smell the pastries and we want to go. But it speaks to the very human nature of what we're dealing with, that people aren't going to just say, we're at the end, we're going to turn around. They're looking for something else, and well noted. And I do find interesting that Stantec is doing both projects. While you may not be working with them, they're definitely working with you on the other project, because they mentioned it at the end of a Board of Select Board meeting where they kind of slipped up and admitted that they were bringing it down, the bike trail down to this very entrance and exit. So I would encourage you to not work separately, but work together to realize that's a really bad idea. And I think there's been a little misconception that we don't want this extension to happen. I believe that most of us in here do want that extension to happen. But what we would like it to do is to happen in a safe and very thoughtful way. And I know that Mr. Driscoll noted that Old County Road is a problem. I would suggest that we take that same technology with those 3 beautiful bridges on the western end of the project, maybe bring that to the eastern end of the project, and create a beautiful bridge and figure out how we can work our way down the power lines toward Provincetown and maintain what Mr. Driscoll said when you acquired the Payne's Campground, that we have the ability to go along for miles and miles in a safe, beautiful environment. I realize that not doing this is going to take more effort, take more time, probably take more money, honestly. But the ability to achieve that goal without harming anyone would be, I would think, a worthwhile goal. And as most people know, we have been long involved with another multi-agency project here, the Herring River Project. And what I've noted over a lot of time and a lot of meetings is that when there is truly a will to look for another option, it's amazing what other options can be come up with. So I would hope that instead of ignoring the DOT's future plans and maybe ignoring what your other partner in Centec is doing, to consult and figure out a much safer, better pathway.
Thank you. Andrew Freeman. Andrew Freeman. Yield, thank you. Bud McComber. Bud, I'm sorry, I can't read your handwriting. Bud? Thank you.
I'm an East Ham resident, so don't throw me out, but I ride the bike trail almost every day, and I love riding the bike trail. And I think I'm a serious cyclist, so I like getting to the bike trail at Lecount Hollow and having an option, and that option is to go right over to the ocean and the back roads up to Truro, or I can go left and go up Route 6 to Truro and Provincetown. This just seems to be putting me right on the highway at the end of the trail. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys like me who ride and get to the end of the trail, and that's not the end of my ride. I'm going to want to go somewhere else, and I'm going to head out onto that highway and look for another route, because I'm not done yet. So I think you ought to consider that and maybe end at the campground, and then, you know, from there you can take different roads, different options. Thank you.
Thank you. Brent Harold. Brent?
Hi. I've lived here for a long time, and I'm nowhere near in a butter. I have used the rail trail a fair amount. I was at the October 22nd meeting, and to me, you would have gotten a lot more trust at this meeting if you had started out this meeting with some honesty, because at the 22nd meeting, you were assuming that in order for this to work, you would need to have a two-way trail up Route 6. That would be the way that you'd get at least past through Wellfleet, and the assumption was that becomes the long-awaited bike path. So I've been here long enough to know what the original bike trail dream was, through back roads, maybe along the original railroad bed until it was found out that it was mostly bought up years ago. And so if you had started out and said, yes, we know this, the only logic here is we're not saying that all this trouble is worth a 10-minute ride added on to a longer ride. Then we expect you all to turn around, or we're going to force you to turn around. At the time, you assumed it was part of a longer drive, and you presented diagrams about that two-way pathway that the DOT would probably have to come up with, or if somebody did. And you alluded to that in a positive kind of way. That was what you were suggesting. So to come around here and say that we've designed this parking lot so that people can't or won't get out of it, I hope you're seeing now that nobody believes that. So either you plan to change this thing and say, we're going to put a Trumpian wall up there that's going to keep bikers, maybe an electric fence or something that's going to keep drivers. If you don't do that, in this whole new vision of it, which just has nothing to do with the dream of a path to P-Town, either you're going to do that or you're going to have a lot of the consequences that people are worried about here. I wish also you had started the meeting saying, we understand that since we are here on October 22nd, your town meeting voted fairly strongly against this. If you'd started out and said, it's a whole new ballgame, because I know on October 26th, there were a lot more people who were in favor of this thing. A lot of them were Up Cape people who wanted to extend their ride, and a lot fewer people who spoke against it. This meeting is completely different. A lot of water has gone under the bridge. There are a lot of new understandings. People have studied this a lot more. And there's that town meeting vote where it was discussed. So it would have helped if you had started out and said, whole new ballgame, we understand, we're not presenting you with something we want a rubber stamp for. We understand now that you probably don't want this. Let us try to talk you into it anyway, or talk some version of it. But it's, I hope you're getting the idea here that there are some huge contradictions in what you're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are here to present the current designs and listen to your input. And thank you for the input that we're receiving. There is indeed, sir, for years, a long-term vision, as someone else mentioned, to go from the bridge to P-Town. There is a vision for a continuous bike trail. But let me reiterate that the DCR's responsibility is for the Cape Cod Rail Trail as defined. And the only right-of-way that's owned by the state for that starts in Yarmouth and ends here at Route 6. So that is the extent of our responsibility for maintaining an ongoing trail. What happens in the vision to extend from this terminus to the north and to the south is not a DCR project. There are towns to the south, as you're probably aware, that are working to try and connect the end of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, which is DCR's responsibility, down to Falmouth and the Shining Sea, up to the bridge. And we're certainly interested in those efforts to make that connectivity. But we're here to talk about the DCR project, so that's the clarification. We're hearing that loud and clear. Geraldine Raymer. Geraldine Raymer.
I'd like to add my voice to those who have expressed concern earlier about getting in and out of that parking lot by motor vehicle from Route 6. Nothing's been said about what kind of signage you might have on Route 6 to indicate where that exit and entrance is, and particularly for people coming from the north. How do you envision those people turning left against traffic on Route 6? And what if they just slightly miss the entrance? What are they going to do?
Thank you.
Can I make
Shannon?
a quick comment on that? I think it's important to remember that it's an active curb cut currently. For years, there's been food trucks in that lot, people turning in and out. We will improve that dramatically, and we may consider things like no left turn, leaving the lot. We have to think through some of this, and there's a lot of good comments to help us think that way. But remember that that's a commercially zoned lot. It's the last commercially zoned lot before you hit the residential row that was going to be sold, whether DCR bought it or not. And something would have happened there. It would have been another commercial development, hopefully not as big as the Cumberland Farms, but there would have been some form of a parking lot with a curb cut per current zoning. And that's important to keep in mind. We agree that we need to think about that curb cut long and hard to maximize its safety and circulation.
Thank you, Dan. Shannon Bertrand?
I echo the sentiments of those that came before me, especially those that are against many parts of this plan, especially that one on the upper right. But I also have to selfishly get my 2 cents in here. In the event that you go ahead with this project, regardless of our concerns, as an abutter, I live on my property abuts Old County and the railroad bed, right where you are proposing excavation in an effort to meet ADA compliance. And my main concerns are the erosion issues that will be invariably created when you excavate sand, and how that's going to be addressed as far as my property goes, and those along the railroad bed beyond me towards Payne's Campground. Have there been any drainage or erosion studies done and the impacts of what you plan to do there? I do have a copy of the, what is it called, the cross-section of the berm excavation plan, and it doesn't make any sense to me, so I don't know if anybody can help me to understand that.
Maybe after the meeting, if you could talk to Derek,
Yeah,
our engineer.
unfortunately, I have my 8-year-old here, so we're going to
Okay.
have to go to bed soon. But
Okay.
I have emailed, I've called, I've been to all the meetings, and I still am here.
Sure. If you would leave your number with Jenny.
I have.
Okay, then we'll have Derek give you a call and address your concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Martinson? Eric? Okay, now we're returning to the public officials. Ned Oliver from the Bike Committee. Ned, thank you.
I think you can hear pretty unanimously from the town. What we're just asking for is a little patience on this. Instead of trying to ramrod this thing through, it seems like this parking lot at Amsler's has been bought, and you are just determined to go get the path out to Route 6. I think most everybody here, as we've said, love the idea of coming from Lecount Hollow. It's going to be a beautiful ride along the old railroad bed. But why can we not stop, be patient, and try to figure out a better route? And there are better routes, and a lot of them have been outlined already tonight. I'm not going to try to get into that now. It's a lot. But my main point is, can we not stop the project at Old County Road and not build this parking lot for the time being? Because once the parking lot's built, it's going to happen. And as everybody said, it's going to be such a disaster. And I'd like to also reiterate what I've heard earlier, is that not just for bikes, but for cars. I'm a big bicyclist, but I would dread the thought of being out on Route 6, trying to make a left-hand turn and having a two-way bike lane to deal with. It is just a disaster. So just give us a little time to figure this out. We're working on it with the Bike Committee. We're trying to find a better route to avoid Route 6. And just think of how beautiful that could be. And as I heard earlier, if there's the will, and there is the will here in town, we can do it. And just give us that opportunity to try to think this out, and don't ramrod this thing through without, just a little bit of patience here, and stop the project at, Old County Road is what we'd ideally like for the time being anyway. Just give us that chance.
Greg Wright. Greg Wright.
was a time in this state when the townspeople had to work with the state and the feds. Did you even invite the National Seashore to this meeting?
There is a representative of the National Seashore
Okay.
here.
So why not take a right-hand turn after the Wellfleet Senior Center and find a path with their help to Long Pond Road as an option? I've written a book, a guidebook to Cape Cod cycling, and I understand the desire for an extension, but this can't be the way. You're not going to continue it across to Way 68, rebuild the train bridge, go through a tunnel under Railroad Avenue and out the other end. That's not going to happen. So I don't know why we're not working with the National Seashore. We got a National Seashore because everybody worked together. There might be a path.
And with that, our last speaker is Carl Soderblom from the Seashore, if you'd like to say anything.
First of all, I'm so glad that I'm on this side of the microphone and not on that side for once. I've been doored on Route 6. I've had my car totaled as the meat in a 3-car sandwich on Route 6. Bicycles are here. All you have to do is look anywhere. Every single car has multiple bicycles on the back of it or on the roof of it. The park several years ago engaged along with the towns of Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet on an Outer Cape Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. I think the key to the success of that master plan is to create a serious network of options, of alternatives for people to not have to use their cars, to be able to use their bicycles and enjoy it. I am an avid bicyclist, and as much as I hate riding on Route 6, and even with those lanes on either side of Route 6, they're horrible. There are still a lot of potholes, and they're very dangerous. But I'd rather ride on Route 6 than ride on Long Pond Road, Gull Pond Road, Grosse Hill Road, because I have no idea where those cars are coming around the corner and what people aren't paying attention. So I don't envy you the solution to this problem, but it's obviously a very real problem, and I would like to see the network of trails continued, which would include the extension of the rail trail. I've ridden the entire rail trail. I paved the rail trail in 2008 when I was at DCR. I would say that there are opportunities on Route 6 that we need to work with DOT on. In some areas, the right-of-way is 300 feet wide, and I think that we need to look at them outside of our own parochial barriers. The reference was made to working with the National Park. We are an active participant in this. We also have other masters to serve as it relates to the use of the land. We are extending the head of the meadow bike path in one direction as we're repaving it, but we also have to deal with natural resource impacts as we do these kinds of things. So I think it's really important for us to work together collectively with the towns, with the state park agency as well. And I believe that everybody has good intent on this, and I think that we just really need to work together. Those are very important considerations that were raised about the parking lot. I don't know what the answer is. I understand the concern about getting people off the road, getting them the opportunity to enjoy the bike path at the end of the bike path. I think exploring the other rights of way that are out there to help with access on Route 6. You have addressed the fact that this is a commercial lot. There's a lot of coming and going in that lot, but it is a real concern, and I think that we have to be very careful with putting more people on that road at that area, and especially the poignancy of it being where Miles Tibbetts lost his life, and we're reminded of that daily. So I appreciate the time, And I would just say, keep working on it, keep coming back, keep working with the folks to come up with a really good workable solution, because that's a really important thing. Bicycling is the second most popular activity in Cape Cod National Seashore, and it ain't gonna change. Thank you.
Thank you. So in response to your first comment, it's been perfectly fine to be on this side of the microphones for us this evening. You've been a very respectful and thoughtful group. We understand that there are a lot of concerns, which we've heard loud and clear, about the safety of people, both pedestrians, cyclists, and thank you, motorists. We've heard loud and clear the concerns about Route 6 and the challenges that are presented to you every summer on that road. We came here to present what our current plans were and to receive your comment. And we certainly did receive your comment, and we will accept the petitions that you had. We obviously need to regroup and think about and absorb what we've heard this evening. I think there is an opportunity for your neighbors who were not able to join us this evening to express their concerns as well. The PowerPoint that you saw this evening will be up on the DCR website starting maybe Monday. So please encourage your friends and neighbors who are not able to join us this evening to go to the website, look at the presentation, and for those of you who perhaps didn't want to speak in public this evening but have concerns that you want us to hear, please write those to us and submit those online comments. We're accepting comments on this until June 28th on what this meeting was and what we've presented this evening. Clearly, we've got more thinking to do, and after we've done that thinking, we will be back to you to further this dialogue. But thank you so much for your interest and concern for your fellow citizens and for the safety of all who use these areas. Thank you for coming this evening, and please, as you drive home or walk home or cycle home, please be safe. And one of the things I will say, that has been mentioned many times today, the distracted driving and the excessive speed have really contributed to accidents by many people. And that's something that all of us in this room can do something about. If we provide a good example of being focused on the road and just slowing down, we're all today in such a damn hurry to get someplace. But I think if we all try to model good behavior, perhaps it'll be contagious and we get others to do it as well. Thank you for being here this evening.